What's up YouTube, welcome back to another episode of the Boss Recap, where we rate boss battles in our favorite video games. I'm your host DMLX, and today we'll be gathering the 7 Guardians of Light to face off against the 13 Seekers of Darkness in Kingdom Hearts 3. Kingdom Hearts 3 is the finale of the Darkseid saga from Disney and Square Enix's collaborative action RPG series that has spanned 19 years since the original Kingdom Hearts game's release way back in 2002. Chronologically set after the events of Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, Sora must once again team up with Donald and Goofy in the search of the remaining 7 Guardians of Light as they attempt to stop Xehanort's mission to bring about another Keyblade War. Throughout their journey, they'll cross paths with familiar and new faces, as well as visit worlds based on Disney and, for the first time in the series, Pixar animated films. The anticipation for Kingdom Hearts 3 was immeasurable, thanks to the many bridge games, remakes, final mixes, and HD collections released after Kingdom Hearts 2. And even though Kingdom Hearts 3 may have been far from the perfect game many fans wanted, it still managed to be a sweeping success, with Kingdom Hearts 3 selling over 5 million copies within the first week of release, becoming both the fastest and best-selling game in the history of the series. Personally, I enjoyed my overall experience with the base game of Kingdom Hearts 3, mainly from a gameplay perspective, specifically with the additions of more expansive Disney worlds to explore, the use of Keyblade transformations, the introduction of air step, increase in party size, and some fun minigames to play like cooking with Remy from Pixar's Ratatouille. Story-wise, it could have been better to say the least. So, how tough was it for Sora and company to put an end to Xehanort's schemes once and for all? Well, let's find out and recap the bosses. As a note, for this episode of the Boss Recap, I will not be counting any bosses for when controlling the Gummy Ship. Instead, only boss fights where players are playing as Keyblade wielders will be accounted for, simply for the sake of time, and me being a little lazy. Now, the way boss fights are usually set up in Kingdom Hearts is that they're designed to be more difficult and often larger enemies dealt with midway through and or at the end of a world. Also, the bosses tend to have a significant role in the story for each world, some more than others. And every boss has their health display on the top right corner of the HUD in the form of a long green bar, complemented with small green circles to indicate how many HP bars the boss has left. Emerging from the Station of Awakening, the first boss that players will encounter on Sora's new journey is Darkseid. A recurring heartless boss throughout the series, players will take on the translucent version of Darkseid during the intro/basic tutorial of the game. And like its previous incarnations, Darkseid's attacks are easily telegraphed. So much so, even a blind monkey could take down this open-chested clump of darkness without thinking twice. Landing in the world of Olympus, Sora channels his inner Kratos to take on the 4 titans unleashed by Hades, as the Lord of the Underworld attempts to once again execute his master plan of ruling the cosmos. First up on the Olympian chopping block is the Rock Titan. The Rock Titan has appeared in the Kingdom Hearts series a few times before, twice as a boss in Kingdom Hearts 1 and Recoded, as well as a brief cameo in Kingdom Hearts 2 where Hercules yeets the Titan out of the Colosseum like a member of Team Rocket. In Kingdom Hearts 3, the fight with the Rock Titan takes place mountainside during a rainy thunderstorm, showcasing Sora's traversal prowess in dodging boulders while running on walls and being able to summon a magic train. Choo-choo, motherfuckers! Which is never explained how he's able to actually use his ability during the story whatsoever. After dealing with the stone giant, Sora and company make their way through the realm of the gods to reach Hades. But before they can finally confront Hades, Sora must save Zeus and the rest of the gods by dealing with the remaining titans. Serving up an icy hot combo on Olympus are the Ice and Lava Titan. A tricky battle to endure, seeing they have to know when to find the right opportunities to strike while avoiding both elemental giants' similar attack patterns and traversing around Zeus's prison that looks like a massive turd fused with ice and lava. Players will also have the option to summon the magic carousel during the fight, so that's fun. Immediately after dealing with Killer Frost and the Molten Man, another swirling storm casts over onto our heroes in the form of the Tornado Titan. Arguably one of the most thrilling boss fights in the series to date, the Tornado Titan sends players into a whirlwind of chaos, hurling all sorts of debris and can even at times suck up Sora like a vacuum, which will then lead to Sora being able to perform a cheeky dive attack. Meanwhile, in the realm of darkness, Riku and Mickey are on their journey in search of Aqua, who's been lost for 10 years since the events of Birth by Sleep, and Mickey leaving her behind during the events of 0.2, but we don't have to talk about that. Anyways, by the time the duo reach the Dark Margin, the 2 Keyblade Masters get ambushed by a flock of Shadow Heartless, which soon form into a Demon Tower. This encounter will put players in control of Riku for the first time, with Mickey as an ally, further showcasing Riku's ability to embrace the darkness while fighting for the light, all the while getting a new haircut in the process.
I like it, cut G.
After stopping Hades in his tracks, again, Sora, Donald, and Goofy set off to Twilight Town to catch up with old friends, but are unexpectedly greeted by the Demon Tide. a more evolved version of the Demon Tower. However, the fight with the Demon Tide doesn't showcase the grouped Heartless's full potential, seeing that players only need to deplete less than 3 HP bars to beat the Swarm of Shadows in the Tram common area. Still, it's a shame that players aren't able to physically jump on the Demon Tide as depicted during the announcement trailer. That would have been pretty sick if the developers were able to pull that off. Continuing our Disney World tour, the next world Sora, Donald, and Goofy get entangled into is the Kingdom of Reenacting the events of the film Tangled, our trio help Flynn Rider escort Rapunzel to view the floating lanterns she sees every night on her birthday. Throughout the journey, you'll come across 2 major boss level threats. First up is the rowdy rumbling Chaos Carriage, a large emblem Heartless with the front half resembling a horse, while its back half looks like 3 large rook chess pieces on wheels. This raging saddle is all about charging you down every chance it gets, so keep your distance and pick your string of attacks wisely. The climax of Kingdom of takes the players back to Rapunzel's tower, where Sora and company witness the rapidly aging Mother Gothel fall to her demise, but then gets turned into a Heartless by Marluxia, codenamed the Grim Guardianess. This tree-like nightmare is highly mobile, using branches and brambles as its main form of physical harm, as well as having the ability to summon a swarm of dark sparrows from its mouth, cherry bombs, literal plant traps, and even pollen spores to get the trio's allergies acting up. Viewing life from a much smaller perspective, players head to the world of Toybox based on Pixar's Toy Story. Most of Toybox takes place in a 3-story store called Galaxy Toys, an original area within the Toy Story canon. Sora, Donald, and Goofy, along with the aid of Woody and Buzz Lightyear, will fight against 2 major toy-themed adversaries that like to play rough. Giving the Conjuring's Annabelle doll a run for its creep status is the Angelic Amber. Possessed by a Heartless, players come in contact with this aggressive anime doll after finding Ham imprisoned in a dollhouse. The fight with Angelic Amber can be quite hectic, being that she's constantly on the move using various attacks that consist of slams, spins, and charges infused with darkness, all the while being assisted by other Heartless and possessed toys, making players feel like Sid surrounded by his tortured toys in the original Toy Story. After rescuing Buzz from young Xehanort, the would-be Seeker of Darkness makes his escape by summoning the King of Toys. Acting as the final boss of Toybox, this large UFO-like Heartless can be a little troublesome to deal with, seeing that this Heartless's only weak point is its small bobblehead dome, as well as having to avoid its string of attacks and countermeasures that consist of using a shock barrier, missiles, energy blasts, and the ability to produce a massive electromagnetic storm. Yeah, this toy is definitely going to need a recall if this plans on being sold to the global market. Going from a knick-knack attire to a more monstrous form, Sora and company venture off to the world of Monstropolis, where Sora, Donald, Goofy team up with Monsters Inc. alumni James P. Sullivan, aka Mike Wazowski, and Boo to get rid of the Unverse causing trouble within the factory. However, even though we get the appearance of Randall and Vanitas throughout the world, there's only one boss fight for players to take on. Looking like a monster straight out of Epic Mickey, this massive sludge of darkness is known as the Lump of Horror. The only Unverse boss in Kingdom Hearts 3, the Lump of Horror was used as a trump card gifted to Randall by Vanitas to use in case of interference with their plans and using the Unverse to collect children's screams. It has the ability to shapeshift, project fireballs, use steam from its scream canisters to produce a thundercloud status effect, and sprout an abundance of tar hands to keep players distracted. It even has a demonic wing form where the Lump of Horror will constantly flap its wings, creating a harmless gust of wind that will push the players backwards. A tough enemy to deal with, especially on harder difficulty, due to the Black Blob's aggressive attack patterns and not being able to stagger its mobility to pull off clean combos. Heading into the snowy storm front of Texas, I mean Arendelle, Sora, Donald, Goofy get woven into the story of Disney's Frozen, where they end up discovering and helping 2 new Princesses of Heart from becoming pawns of the new Organization 13. Eventually, after trying to confront Elsa for the 3rd time, players will face off against the not-so-friendly Snowman, Marshmallow. Meant to serve as Elsa's bodyguard and soon to be one of the best party members in Kingdom Hearts history, Marshmallow is a sturdy stack of snow to take down, whether he'd be swinging his fist like an angry cat, creating shockwaves from stomping the ground, or blowing out gusts of ice from his mouth. He'll even cover himself in icy spikes of armor when put into a deeper enraged state. In this situation, it's best to channel one's inner Hades by having Marshmallow feel the heat with a barrage of fire-based attacks, along with a good whip to the face using trees placed around the battlefield. Deep within the heart of the winter storm, players will soon be allied with Marshmallow and must face a large threat forged from Prince Hans's darkness, Skull. A wolf-like Heartless based on the monstrous creature from Norse mythology fated to devour the sun during Ragnarok, which probably explains why it summons a massive dark spirit bomb for its DM. Skull uses various charge and melee strikes that deal heavy damage if not blocked or dodged accordingly, and can even summon little loopy-eyed wolf-head minions to throw off your guard. best to just steer clear of Skull's dark spinning slam of death, and you should be able to tame this Arctic beast no problem. Sailing over to a more tropical setting, Sora Dalguva returns to the world of pirates, aka the Caribbean, where players partner up with Captain Jack Sparrow and take part in the events of At World's End, the third film in the swashbuckling attraction ride-based franchise. Ironically, the first boss encounter in the Caribbean doesn't take place at sea, but in the sky against the Raging Vulture. After escaping Davy Jones's locker, Sora, Jack, and the others are attacked by this giant mechanical winged Heartless, aided by a fleet of Vaporflies that players can ride on as one of the main ways to do damage to the boss, with the other option being Sora mounting on the Roasted Turkey's back and rattling its massive skeletal cranium for a good 30 seconds. Also, the air skirmish takes place above the Black Pearl, which players have to protect from the Raging Vulture's attacks, adding more levels of stress to this encounter, especially on higher difficulty. As large-scale battles happens above the surface, they can also occur from below, specifically when players clash with the electrifying Heartless Lightning Angler. Designed and named after the actual angler fish species, this is one of 2 boss fights to take place underwater, limiting Sora's abilities when it comes to the use of form changes, shot locks, summons, team attacks, and attractions, making the use of magic a huge benefactor during this battle. Also, thanks to the major improvements with the underwater combat in terms of mobility and performing combos, the fight plays out a lot smoother compared to the series' previous attempt at underwater combat with Atlantica from Kingdom Hearts 1. Eventually, after players recover a new ship, collect some crabs, and take on an entire Heartless naval fleet, they set sail for Shipwreck Cove, enter the stormy whirlpool, and help Jack fight Davy Jones. As a boss, the captain of the Flying Dutchman is a tricky one to pin down, seeing that Tentacle Beard frequently teleports around the Dutchman like a game of whack-a-mole and will occasionally summon the Kraken to assist him in combat. Personally, I just use King's Flare and have Simba stomp Davy Jones to oblivion, but that's just me. From sailing the high seas to scaling buildings, players venture off to San Fransokyo, where they team up with local superhero team Big Hero 6 and bring the invading Heartless to justice. The first major threat Keyblade Hero 3 and Big Hero 6 encounter on their vigilante patrol are the Dark Cubes. Based on the microbots created by Hiro Hamada, the Dark Cubes were released on San Fransokyo by Dark Riku in an experiment to create a complete heart from data. Like Hiro's microbots, the Dark Cubes have the ability to shapeshift into nearly any object they want, whether it be a giant fist, spinning blade, or a laser shooting octopus. However, the only way to cause damage to this swarm of blocks is by attacking its central core. Otherwise, players might as well be swinging at air. Continuing the journey in San Fransokyo, players will come across another heartless monstrosity, the Catastrophic Horus. One of the more odd-looking designed bosses in Kingdom Hearts 3, the Catastrophic Horus is a heavy-hitting Heartless that can perform a variety of attacks that range from basic stomping of the feet, the use of active volcanoes spewing from its spine, and having a thundercloud tail that can rain down lightning bolts at nearly any range, providing a fun callback to classic Japanese kaiju battles, albeit with significantly less collateral damage. Rounding out Sora's time in San Fransokyo, the final Disney boss players will clash against is Dark Baymax. Revealed to be the original Baymax that was lost in an unknown dimension during the events of the Big Hero 6 film, the corrupted Baymax is now under the control of Dark Riku as another experiment to see if a heart can be created from data. The entire boss fight has players use the Interceptor wing attack, which has Sora riding on Baymax's back for the entire encounter, limiting the players' use of magic, form changes, items, and link summons, but can still heal yourself with the use of Baymax's Care Spray. Also, the fight is broken into 2 phases, the first phase being an on-rails shooter, in which Sora and Baymax pursue Dark Baymax through the streets of San Fransokyo, with the second phase playing out more like a traditional boss fight where Sora and Baymax corner Dark Baymax in the South District. Although, I'll admit the concept art for this encounter made the boss fight look more epic than it actually turned out being. Now, with all the Disney worlds out of the way, the story of Kingdom Hearts 3 begins to really ramp up, starting with the rescue of Aqua in the Realm of Darkness. Unfortunately, due to her encounter with Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, and failure to protect Ansem the Wise, Aqua gets corrupted by the darkness and the influence of Xehanort takes over, fully transforming herself into Anti-Aqua.
Dun dun dun.
There are 2 scenarios when it comes to fighting against Anti-Aqua. First, there is Riku, where players must fight Anti-Aqua controlling the Demon Tower using the Star Cluster Keyblade she took from Mickey, who was trapped in the Demon Tower as well. Once Riku destroys the Demon Tower and frees Mickey with the help of Sora by summoning their combined Keyblade from Dream Drop distance, Sora is then left to finish off Anti-Aqua and fully free her from the darkness. Now, if you played 0.2 Birth by Sleep beforehand, Anti-Aqua will act similarly to the Phantom Aqua boss fights with her use of Spellweaver, Doppelgangers, and use of Homing Orbs. After saving 1/3 of the Wave Fighter trio, we move on to
Another one.
where Aqua, along with Sora, Down, Goofy head off to Castle Oblivion, aka the land of departure, to wake up Ventus. However, before Sora and company can wake Ventus from his decade-long coma, players have to get past Ventus' dark reflection, Vanitas. Last seen getting yeeted out of Monstropolis, Vanitas catches up with our heroes in the land of departure to stop Ventus from waking up, thus leading to players taking control of Aqua for the first time and battling the masked boy in a one-on-one duel. Not surprisingly, Vanitas' moveset is nearly identical to how he engaged players in Birth by Sleep, albeit with a bit more flair and a better visual presentation. Best advice, just give this brooding adolescent Darkspawn a good taste of the rainbow while cartwheeling away from his heavy attacks. Fast forward to the events of the Keyblade Graveyard, where the epic clash between the Guardians of Light and the Seekers of Darkness will take place. But before that, players must wipe out a Heartless army, Donald Duck disintegrating Xehanort, as well as witness a massive wave of Heartless pretty much kill off all our heroes, which then leads to Sora waking up in the final world and finding his way back to the Realm of Light through Kairi and using the power of waking to revive his friends. But in order for Sora to free his friends from the Abyss of Darkness, he must defeat the haunting horror responsible for keeping his friends' hearts hostage, the Lich. Based off the recurring enemy type in the Final Fantasy games, this pure-blood Heartless heavily focuses on magic-based attacks and loves to zip around the battlefield, and is often assisted by other Heartless to fend off against Sora's pursuit, which then leaves players having to fight the Lich across multiple worlds Sora's been to throughout the course of the game, similar to the events of End of the World in Kingdom Hearts 1. Soon after Sora reverses time and revives his friends, they head back into the fight. There, the Lingering Will is called upon to take on Xehanort, and the classic trio are left to fight off a school of Heartless, yet again in the form of the Demon Tide. Finishing what it started in Twilight Town, this Demon Tide is primed and ready for round 2, whether it be flinging a barrage of shadows at Sora, constantly bull rushing across the field, or performing sneak attacks from below. Now if you're a 0.2 Birth by Sleep veteran, you'll be familiar with the Demon Tide's second phase, as it starts to transform into a tornado of shadows, becoming more aggressive and forcing players to keep their distance more often in the latter half of the fight. Ultimately, the battle with the Wave of Heartless ends in a cinematic fashion with Sora calling forth the power of the Unions to reach out and destroy the Demon Tide's core. As well as having Master Yensig come in clutch by holding back the remaining Heartless long enough so that the Guardians of Light can confront their hooded counterparts once and for all. As both Guardians of Light and Seekers of Darkness meet at a crossroads, the new Keyblade War officially begins with Master Xehanort creating a massive labyrinth split into 3 sections, with the first 2 sections each containing a pair of square arenas where players must battle 2 or more organization members alongside 1 or 2 fellow Guardians. Revealed to have a connection with the ancient Keyblade legacy, players assist Mickey fighting against the likes of Luxord, Larxene, and Marluxia. And yes, I am counting group organization battles as a single boss fight, just like I did with the Ice Titan and Lava Titan. Anyways, Mickey doesn't fight by your side for the entire bout, seeing that he gets trapped by Luxord early on, and can only be freed once players defeat Luxord by playing a game of hide and seek.
You're recompleted.
Thanks.
Once Mickey is free, he is able to help Sora against Larxene and Marluxia, who have a much more diverse moveset to deal with compared to their card-throwing comrade. In another part of the labyrinth, Sora backs up Riku to help fight against the most unconventional pair amongst the new organization, Xigbar and Dark Riku. Though these two Xehanort vessels seem like an odd couple on paper, they actually complement each other quite well in game, with Xigbar keeping his distance by shooting at players from afar with his arrow guns, while Dark Riku takes on more of the offensive role, giving Kingdom Hearts 1 veterans PTSD from the second Riku boss fight in Hollow Bastion. Moving on, we have the reunion of the Sea Salt Trio, where players take control of Sora and team up with Roxas and Xion to defeat Saïx. In the first part of the fight, Saïx fights alongside Xion, which then leads to Sora having Lee and Kairi as allies, but eventually Lee is subdued by Xemnas' barrage of lasers, and Kairi gets captured again.
What number is this? Do you get off on being captured?
However, Xion soon defects from the organization to become a Guardian of Light thanks to Roxas' heart calling out to her, which then transitions into the second battle where players can pretty much pull up a long chair, relax, and let Roxas do all the work. Seeing that Roxas' attacks inflict stupid amounts of damage on Saïx, allowing players to tag in for the finishing blow. Taking the term identity fraud to the extreme, players help Aqua and Ventus take down the likes of Xehanort and Vanitas. Both Harbingers of Darkness put on relentless pressure, so much so that players will often get blindsided by either Xehanort or Vanitas depending on who you're occupied with. Now the general consensus is to take out Vanitas first, since Xehanort's DM is arguably more dangerous to deal with, especially when Vanitas is still running around being the little pest that he is. The Keyblade War continues with another triple header, where players help Riku and Mickey take on Ansem, Xemnas, and young Xehanort. Presented as the top tier members of the real Organization 13, and callbacks to being the final bosses of previous Kingdom Hearts games, the Xehanort trio is a lethal force of dark minds, ethereal blades, and time warping attacks. On top of that, you have Old Man Xehanort off to the side summoning a dust storm full of Keyblades.
Get over here!
Riku! King Mickey!
Prompting players to dodge for their life while avoiding incoming attacks from his 3 remaining vessels. In the world of Scala at Kylum, Sora, with the aid of Donald and Goofy, make their final stand against Master Xehanort. But before they can send the old man to the great beyond, they must deal with the replica Xehanorts. These 12 sets of clones perform very few attacks, which include either 3-hit combos or spinning slash maneuvers. The good news is the clones share a health bar, meaning there's no need to focus on multiple replicas to finish the fight. Not to mention trying to avoid the replica's satanic looking DM that rains down laser beams all around Scala. All the while the replicas will try to repeatedly charge players down like it's a running of the bulls in Spain. After dispatching the replicas, the real Master Xehanort steps out of the shadows and absorbs his fallen vessels to become Goatman, aka Armored Xehanort. Broken into 3 phases, players will have to fight Xehanort across multiple stages, starting with the plaza warped into a closed chamber, then move to an underwater battle where we see the ruins of Daybreak Town, and lastly back up to the surface hovering above Desecrate Scala with a stormy backdrop. Undoubtedly the most hectic boss fight in the game due to the changing combat scenarios, as well as Armored Xehanort being immensely powerful with his flare-imbued spells, relentless Keyblade strikes, and heavy throws that will undoubtedly give Sora back problems later in life.
And look at Randy Orton slithering.
Watch out! Watch out! Watch out! Watch out!
Finally, it comes down to this, with Sora and Donald Goofy scaling the top of Scala Kylum to take part in the final battle against Master Xehanort. Armed with the newly forged Keyblade, Xehanort is given a wide range of new abilities that make him a force to be reckoned with, whether it be constantly warp striking around the stage through keyhole-like portals, summoning pillars of light, using various elemental magic attacks, or sending out a flock of shadow clones to smother players into darkness. Even so, what truly sells this battle as one of the most memorable boss fights in the series is the fake death screen to set up the use of Trinity as the final attack to end Xehanort's reign for good. As for post-game content, there's only one optional boss fight players will encounter in the base game, the Dark Inferno. Accessible through the 14th battle gate located in the Keyblade Graveyard, the Dark Inferno is a pureblood Heartless that looks like a beefed up version of the Invisible Heartless from Kingdom Hearts 1 with flaming roller skates. Heavily reliant on its large dual swords, the Dark Inferno has relatively predictable attack patterns balanced by delivering heavy amounts of damage, as well as an increase in aggression and smaller openings to attack as the fight progresses. Meaning it's not the hardest boss fight in the world, but it's certainly no Kurtzitza or Phantom, I'll tell you that much. By my count, there were a total of 32 bosses in Kingdom Hearts 3. 31 of the bosses are available through the main story, with the Dark Inferno being the only optional boss fight fought exclusively in Battlegate 14. During this review playthrough, every boss was defeated on critical mode, which is the hardest difficulty in the game, seeing that playing on critical cuts Sora's MP and HP in half, situation commands take twice as long to build up, and will have players receive heavier amounts of damage from enemies. Overall, Kingdom Hearts 3 provides a solid variety of boss fights that keep engagements fresh as players progress through the game, ranging from well-designed Heartless/Unversed, creative use of Disney adversaries, and compelling matchups between the 13 Seekers of Darkness versus the 7 Guardians of Light. So, when it comes to the game's placement on the boss tier scale, I'm placing Kingdom Hearts 3 in the A tier. When looking at our boss token awards, the Soulsborne award for the hardest boss fight goes to Armored Xehanort. Definitively the hardest boss fight during my critical playthrough, with this fight giving me the most deaths due to Armored Xehanort's relentless pressure and changing combat scenarios that I needed to adapt to on the fly. The Great Mighty Pooh award for the worst boss fight goes to the Lich. Honestly, this boss overstayed its welcome. By the time I got to the third fight with the Lich, I wish I was playing on PC so I could mod in a skip fight command. The Bowser Jr. award for the easiest boss fight goes to Darkseid. Like with most encounters against Darkseid in the Kingdom Hearts series, this boss is simply a tune-up fight for players, and is rarely considered a real threat whatsoever. The Golden Pickaxe award for the most creative boss fight goes to the Tornado Titan. Now I was going to give this award to Skull for the Dark Spirit Bomb sequence alone, but I was won over by the Tornado Titan's use of its environment, abilities, and resourcefulness, specifically when taking advantage of the other Titans by using their elements as weapons during the battle. The Ultimate Showdown award for the best boss fight goes to Master Xehanort. The final battle against Xehanort may have been tame compared to previous final bosses in Kingdom Hearts games, but from my experience, this fight delivers when it comes down to the narrative build-up, the setting, musical score, gameplay, and arguably having one of the most memorable boss ending finishers in Kingdom Hearts history, if not gaming history. So let me just think in the comments down below about this episode of the Boss Recap. What boss fight stood out to you in Kingdom Hearts 3? And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, it really helps me out. Subscribe for more content from me on the Boss Recap. I'm DMLX, and I'll see you in the future.